addressing the current high inflation, low growth, high debt economy in the context of new systems. So I want to read this to you guys. This is on the World Economic Forum website for the agenda that's going to be happening in 23.
Yeah. By the way, real quick, guys, we're going to publish all the articles down below in the link description so that you guys can do your own independent research. We are working on a system to be able to have the article basically splash in the screen for you guys. We're working on that. But
either way, we want you guys to look at it independently on your own time 100%. So that you guys can come to your own conclusions, right? So check this out. So the first couple sentences, right? Really, the whole paragraph was, what does that even mean? Yeah. Right? Like, I've noticed that a lot of these leaders are very good at, writing these paragraphs that are extremely complicated in their, vague, semantics and verbiage. And, why not just say, hey, we want to do this by doing that, right? Like, what's wrong with that? But here are the first two sentences. Yeah. Policymakers are now operating with a limited fiscal space. Point one, highly disagree, right? If you look at the U.S. tax revenue over the last 4 or 5 years, right? So in 2018, it was 3.33 trillion. 2019 is 3.46 trillion.
Yeah.
2020, 3.42 trillion.
So
last year, 4.05 trillion.
Yeah.
I mean,
question.
Go ahead.
So when they say policymakers are now operating in a limited fiscal space, are they saying that we're running out of, like, there's not enough money to spend? What does that mean?
Well, that's the point. Even with the last point, man, is the government's policymakers. A lot of times, these global elitist leaders are always going to be saying that we need more money. Whether it's climate change, whether it's ESG, whether they're always going to be saying they need more money, and they're going to create the problems to be able to make that case. So, so lie number one: policymakers are operating with a limited fiscal space. That is not true, right? If you look at the government of Japan, if you look at the CCP, if you look at the German government, if you look at the U.S. government, tax revenue all across the board is up. You know who has less money? Us. The consumers, the people, right? Consumer spending power is at dang near all-time lows, right? Like, you look at credit card bills, they're almost nearing $1 trillion. That's a giant bubble, right? But again, first point, that's a lie, right? So while inflationary pressure is forcing a tightening of monetary policy, tighter monetary policies are also having a knock-on effects on emerging markets, with many now struggling to service their debts. So here's what I want to bring up. Where is that debt coming from? So I agree, by the way, with the second half of this line, right? Like, I agree with the World Economic Forum. I highly doubt Klaus Schwab wrote it himself. Usually robots are not capable of putting together sentences. But, when they say that inflationary pressure is forcing a tightening of monetary policy, that's absolutely right. But any basic economist that has graduated with a bachelor's degree in economics from Elgin Community College will be able to tell you that the Federal Reserve should have raised rates a long time ago. We should have not decreased the reserve requirement to 5%, which, very complicated there, but I won't get into that. But, a lot of what they're saying is yes. And their point that they're trying to make is, hey, a lot of these smaller countries, a lot of these smaller economies are not able to have a fair shake. That's the main point that they want to address in
inequality,
Davos,
right?
2023.
Yeah.
But here's the main angle that I want to bring up, right? So do you guys know, just a question for you, right? So there's one country that Klaus Schwab has praised over the years, whether it's this year, 3 years ago, 5 years ago. There's one country that Klaus Schwab has always praised. Nick, you know this country. What is this country, Nicholas?
I wish we had a soundboard for Trump to just say China.
Yeah, China.
China.
I don't know if China is the right answer, but it's China, right? So recently, right? I mean, Nick, you brought this up to me. You sent this article over to me through Facebook Messenger a couple weeks ago. But it's early in November. Klaus Schwab says that China should be the model for all countries to follow, right? And here's what I really find interesting is, do you know what country has the lowest climate change score in the world?
China.
Well, that, or I was gonna say something in like Africa.
Actually, I think it might be between China or India.
The lowest, you said pollution.
If you're looking at per capita, right? Like, so China doesn't directly have the lowest score, but if you're looking at per capita and how big this country is, and if you look at the net significant harm that countries are doing when it comes to climate change, China is very bottom of that list, right? I mean, they're right there with South Africa. Sorry, South Africa, love you, South Africans, but China is doing significantly lower.
Lower score, meaning that they're doing more damage to the.
Yeah, if you consider
clarity,
if
right?
you consider the size of the country, right? Like, they're doing significantly more harm per capita than India, than South.
100%.
The U.S. is like top 15.
Yeah, we're not doing bad.
A lot of these
we're not too
protesters
terrible.
that are like, oh my gosh, the United States needs to step. It's like, well, yeah, I mean, things can always be better, right?
Sure.
But at the same time, we kind of don't. We're like,
Well, we have a lot of regulation.
yeah,
We have a lot of like that regulatory body. China does not.
No.
And I've seen like crazy videos of people like in China. They don't have OSHA. They don't have safety standards. I don't
Right.
think they really have those standards across the board. And that's, I mean, if you look at the amount of manufacturing that goes on in that country, I mean, their carbon score is probably negative.
yeah,
Like,
it's pretty bad. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at how they do their manufacturing, and not only that, not only just China, but do you guys know why Africa is so low on climate control or climate change scores? It's mainly because Africa has been the manufacturing arm for China over the last 5-10 years. So you think about all the plants and all the manufacturing arms that China has set up in Africa.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think the African dude woke up and be like, today I'm going to set up a climate destroyer, right? Like, they didn't wake up doing that. You know, I mean, if anything, most Africans believe in holistic natural medicine, natural health, natural production, right? Which, man, I love my African people over there. But, you know, that's mainly the case, right? That's mainly the case. But here's the second question that I have for you guys is, do you guys know what country does more international predatory loans?
China. It's China.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's China. So like, you look at the type of loans that they set up for Tibet, for Mongolia, for a lot of the southeastern Asian countries like Vietnam that are struggling economically. China was the one that gave them predatory loans. So if you look at per capita, if you look at like the top 10, like, and I saw this article, I did this research for a video that I did on the Silk Road Initiative that China is pushing for right now. But if you look at like the top 10 emerging countries right now, and if you look at the debt that they have to pay, like, China has been kind of the predatory bank, right, for a lot of these emerging countries that are struggling to make their payments right now.
Right.
And it's not because of the Federal Reserve, right? Like, popular to contrary belief with the World Economic Forum and all this stuff, you know, the main reason why these emerging countries are struggling, it's not because of inflation. It's not because of COVID. It's not because of all these things. Now, don't get me wrong, they have a good amount to do with it, right? But it's because a country like China came around and offered them extremely predatory loans. Yeah. And the emerging country is not able to pay them back.
Which, by the way, the terms of these loans are terrible. Like, if you default, then pretty much China has every right to come in, restructure your country, or take some of your land, or do. It's almost like what the IMF did back in the 99, 98 to some of these Asian countries, where they pretty much forced a complete restructuring of their monetary and fiscal policy. And that's what's happening. Like, they're basically infiltrating these countries, lending them monies, fully well knowing that the country is not sustainable to pay it back, and then China going, oh, you know what, we knew it, you defaulted, sorry, whatever country you are, we're gonna come in, we get to install our own leadership to your monetary bank policy, and and those policies are gonna be highly favorable towards China.
Or worse, right? What they're actually doing on top of what Sam just said is they're leveraging these countries that can't pay their debt as another manufacturing arm. What China wants to do with these countries is they want to put them in a situation where they're in bankruptcy, they're defaulting on their debt, and now they're going, okay, well, give us cheap labor then. You know, if you can't fulfill on these debt, give us free cheap labor. And by the way, we don't care if that labor is 6 years old, 18 years old, 25 years old, 68 years old.
In order for China to become the number one empire, the country that needs to be, China cannot be China for China, right? Like, what I mean by that is the United States needed China during the 60s, 70s, 80s for manufacturing, right? China is now looking for the next China, which is a weird thing to say. So now they're looking towards Africa, you know, and some of these poor countries for manufacturing.
So I mean, I want to wrap this up, right? I want to wrap the first 2 points, and again, it's ironic, right? Because can you imagine if the U.S. was doing like even 10% of what China is doing? Like the I don't want to say progressive, I guess, protesters, they would go nuts, right? The blue hairs would be spiking off their scalps, you know, like it's insane. So again, for me, that's where so much of the argument and Davos 2023, from my perspective, that's where it loses a lot of its legitimacy. Right? Is the fact that, okay, you're 2 out of your 5, your first 2, by the way, not just any 2, your first 2 initiatives of the 5 of the things that you're going to talk about in the agenda for this meeting, for this 4-day meeting, you're praising the country, right? You're putting this country on a pedestal that's doing the worst and creating the most harm for the two problems that you want to solve. So for me, that's where a lot of the legitimacy goes away. And I would argue, like, hey, feel free to have anybody on here have a discussion with me on why that's not right? So second thing, when it comes to hypocrisy, it brings up, I just think this is really fun to bring up, but they said that for last year's Davos meeting, there was 1,700 flights for private jets in Davos,
into Davos, right?
In and out of Davos, and they actually, somebody said that the amount of carbon emissions that they've emitted is like unreal. Now, here's what I really find interesting: our friendly neighborhood CNN posted an article along with a couple other, you would argue, leftist, media platforms. They posted multiple articles saying that, fact check, that's not true. That's not true, right? Like the private jets, the images are fake, right? That's not true. However, the World Economic Forum put out a statement saying, hey, for all the carbon emissions that we emitted through our private jets, we're going to replace that. So why would they make the statement if it was not true?
Right.
So again, apparently
CNN's like, you're not supposed to say that.
Right, there's a freaking airport there.
It's like, shut up, W, right?
Yeah, there's an airport.
Trying to help you.
There's an airport in Davos itself. I forgot the name of it, but there's an actual airport right next to where they need to go. How convenient.
Right. No, that's exactly right. So apparently the trend is for this year, there's going to be like even more private jets.
Good.
Even more carbon emitted. Right?
Good.
Like, and I love how the narrative is always the same, right? It's like, hey, like we need to solve these problems, but you guys go ahead and do it. We're still gonna live our lifestyle over here. Like we're still gonna eat our meat. We're still gonna sacrifice. I don't want to say that, but we're still gonna fly our private jets, right? While you guys do all the heavy lifting, the common folks, right?
Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Sam Kwak here once again. If you enjoyed that clip, be sure to subscribe to our channel. Hit the bell notification button as well. For the full episode, click on right here, this video, as well as join us live shows at 11 o'clock Centrals on Thursdays. That's right, it's live. We'll see you then.